Good afternoon, evening. How's everybody doing today? Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Before I get started here, I need to thank people. First of whom is standing right up there. Thank you, Mark. Don't hide. Who helped me set up this show. Jim Lane, Mickey McLeod, and the college leadership, who allowed me to delay my sabbatical for a year from 2021 to 2022, and to the faculty that I inconvenienced by staying on another year. Thank you for your patience with me. Thank you to Fulbright and USIEF, and to the University of Kalyani for their flexibility. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to Bankura University and Vice Chancellor Bandyopadhyay and Krishnendu Seth for their generous assistance. And thanks to everyone along the way. I will name you in all the credits. Lastly, to my husband, Nick, happy birthday. And my son, who is famously late. God love him. Lucas, without you, I would not have been able to do this. As VC Bandyopadhyay would have said of Bankura University, he told me, it is our duty to help and assist and share when we can. I am honored to share this research and journey with you today. Thank you for being here on your first Friday when you've got probably a lot of exciting things that you could be doing. So thank you. I'm going to start off by explaining what a Fulbright is. What is it? Well, it's the flagship international academic exchange program sponsored by the U.S. government. And it's been around since 1946, fostering mutual understanding between countries and cultures. And it allows U.S. Faculty members and professors to conduct research, lecture, and consult with other scholars and institutions abroad, and likewise does the exchange for other faculty from those respective countries. So you might be, some of you know me, but you might be asking, why did I pick India, and why specifically West Bengal? Well, I am a ceramist. I teach ceramics here at Johnson County Community College. I've been here for 21 years, hard to believe. But yes, West Bengal is the epicenter of Terracotta, which means baked earth in Latin. And because it's on the Gangetic Plain, it's got a lot of clay, and people discovered this a long time ago. And well, it just so happened in 2011 that a lovely woman came to JCCC, and I was asked to leave my class by my chair, who was at the time Larry Thomas, the late Larry Thomas. And he said, there's a woman in my office that needs to speak with you. And I'm like, well, I'm in the middle of class. He said, you need to come speak with her. I said, okay. And this woman's name was Bashati Ray. And she was from the Kansas City Bengali Association here in Kansas City. And she told me, she said, I have a plea, I have a request of you. And I thought, oh gee, I get all kinds of calls, will you fix this, ceramic angel that's broken off the church, or, things like that. I'm like, no, I really can't do that. I'm not a conservator. She said, no. She said, we need you to make a murti. And I knew what that was because I'd been to India. She didn't know that. And I said, well, when do you need it by? And she said, in a month. And I'm like, okay. I said, how big are we talking? And she said, about like this. And I said, okay. I said, but I'm not qualified. I said, I'm not male. I have not studied the Shilpa Shastras. I am not Hindu, and I'm not qualified to do it. And she said, you know what? We don't care. We need it. We're all a bunch of engineers at Sprint, and we need your help. And I said, well, I'll do it gratis, because I can't promise that it's going to work with a month's notice. So the rest is history. I made the murti, and when I was about midway through making it in the studio, when they turned the heat off on campus in the winter break, they sent the Brahmin priest to me, and he started telling me all these things that I needed to add to it, and this and that and the other. I was like, oh my. It's like, I don't know if I can, live up to the expectation, but I went ahead and did it. And here's me with Bashati Ray and the murti. So here I am in the studio making it, and here's the result. They were pleased with it, which was good. And they went on to ask me to make a much larger one of Durga, 10 arms riding a lion. And again, I said, it's gratis. I'm not going to charge you for it because I can't promise that I can succeed in doing this. I've never made anything like this. So, and they said, well, we want it in terracotta because terracotta is the clay that we use in West Bengal. I was like, okay. So, I started building it in parts. I do figurative work myself, and this is what I took on. So there it is in the kiln, and there it is complete. That's a 18 cubic foot kiln, by the way. It's pretty big, so that shows you how big the piece is. They had to bring a U-Haul truck to pick it up. And there it is at the festival that was held, at one of the local schools. So I was very honored to do that. I don't know if you all know about India or, it's a rather large country, but it's also very far away. It's about 8,000 miles from here. But it's big. And if I hone in on it, what we're looking at in this map, with all those hearts on it, those are places I've been in West Bengal. All the places that I did my research. That is the state of West Bengal. And I needed a letter to go, so I'm just showing you the letter. There's a lot of paperwork that's needed when you start applying for a Fulbright. And in a country like India, there's a lot of paperwork. And patience is absolutely essential. So I ended up getting the grant, and I think they let me know in 2020, and I was to be departing in 2021. Well, you all know what was going on then. Yeah, the pandemic, and even we shut down for a while. So anyway, I got awarded the grant, and shortly thereafter, it got delayed. And then it got canceled and delayed. And this went on and off for about a year. And here's the letters that would go back and forth that I would get. And finally, after a year, I would say maybe in 2021 or 2022, January, they said, you're back on again. But a week later, they said, nope, because the Delta started to peak, the Delta variant. So it got pretty frustrating because I already had my airline tickets for me and my family. They were going to pay. I'm like, yes, we are going to go. It's a go. They were going to pay for my family and I to go, and we were just set. And within a couple of days of these airline tickets being issued, they were gone. So there were no tickets. Fortunately, it was only about a month of delaying. And, but I didn't know that at the time, so I was just like heartbroken. But at the same time, I realized I had no right to complain. India was really, really reeling from COVID, and if you know anything about the statistics, they were highly underreported. But we made it. We got to, this is our flight over, flying over Kolkata. And so if we hone in on, so here's India with West Bengal outlined there. And if we hone in even further, this is a metro map of Kolkata outlined in the red, which I don't know if you can see that. And then it's got this little arrow that has the distance. 12 to 15 miles, all right, there. Well, if you have a map of Kansas City, you can see that to go from Bonner Springs to Independence is about 30 miles. All right, okay, we got that in mind. The Kansas City metropolitan population, not just of Kansas City, but the metro, is about 2.2 million. Kansas City metro has about 7,256 square miles. We are very spread out. And we have about 1,600 people per square mile. Kolkata has, in its metro, 14 million. The square mileage of Kolkata metro, the metro, is 571 square miles versus 7,000. You've got a lot of people packed into a very small area. 63,000 people per square mile. To give you an idea of size, that is Kansas and West Bengal. Kansas is about 2.5 times bigger in square mileage than West Bengal. It's about the size of Indiana. Here's population of the United States. The top 3 populations in our country, the most populated states, are California, Texas, and Florida. When you add those up, it's about 100 million, maybe a little less. The population of West Bengal is greater than those. That's just the little state of West Bengal. So there you have it. Smaller than Kansas and more people than California, Texas, and Florida combined. So this is a clip from Sealdah train station. Well, when you have that many people and you have a pandemic, you've got a problem. It says here that the coronavirus cases and then the deaths were just a little over 500,000. That is grossly understated, very grossly understated. In the United States, there's our, with our sparse population, and that's our deaths and cases. And we just know better than that. And we know this because that these were grossly underreported because everyone we met in India, everyone we met had at least one, if not more, close family members that died. That included 2 of the Fulbright Indian Americans that I met right as I got off the plane. So there you see the COVID spike in India, the Delta spike. So needless to say, We were in a hotel for 2 weeks upon arrival, and I had already lost a month because of the late departure. Week 1 was for COVID, isolation, and paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork. Week 2 was to find an approved apartment in 3 days and to do more paperwork. Needless to say, we drank a lot of cha, street cha. It is so good. Oops. And it's always served in these little clay cups that aren't even glazed. They're just made like really, really fast on a wheel and dried and fired. And wherever you go, they're different styles, but they're lovely, and you're designed to just, drink your cha and then chuck it into the street. So there are hundreds of clay cups all over the street. This is an example of a local train that I would take from Sialda to Kalyani. We had to visit Kalyani very quickly because they had to fill out paperwork for me in order to be associated with them. There's no air conditioning. There are windows, and you can see those fans. Now just imagine when it's full. There is no seating room. There is no standing room. It's like your sardines. It's really, really tight. This is the office of the faculty member that was going to be hosting me. This is the group of her students and her staff that welcomed us as we arrived. You were given all kinds of flowers and all, food. I mean, they just keep bringing the food and the tea. And you have to stay there for as long as they believe is appropriate. And your patience is greatly appreciated, and you do not complain. And it's hot. And they give you more flowers. They give you lots of flowers, and they call you ma'am, and you're like, you don't have to call. No, you just let them do it. Okay. This is the president of the College of the University of Kalyani giving me flowers, and they always want to do these photo ops, so you have to kind of freeze and let them take your picture. This is the faculty member, Dr. Kakali Mandal, who wrote me a letter of support. I came to find out that she not only studied folklore, but also women's studies, nutrition, and a bunch of other things that I wasn't sure what was going on. But she took on my research to just support it at the university. Very quickly after that, though, they really didn't know what to do with me. So they sent me in a rickshaw with one of their grad students to go on these little field trips. They said, well, just go to this temple over here. So I said, okay. So I went to this one. This is right outside of Kalyani by rickshaw. And what I was more interested in is the Terracotta Ananda Badusdeb temple from 1679, not the one from 1813, which is this brick terracotta, typical Bishnupur architecture temple. But nobody knew much about it, and so I just started taking pictures of it, and I have my finger here to show you the scale of the detail of these tiles. When we were on our way back from one of our little field trips, I told the rickshaw driver, I was like, stop. And the grad student's like, what's going on? I said, there's a Kumbhakar over there. And he's like, what? Okay. I said, stop, I want to talk to this guy. So this is the Kumbhakar. A Kumbhakar is a potter. It's a potter class in India. And here he is showing me his wares on the side of the road and his pots that are drying. I said, this is just awesome. I was so excited. These are all cha cups. And I took a picture of them. And anyway, so all this took about a month. And I'm like, time is going by, and I really need to just do my research. I really needed to get to some rural areas. but there were many, many challenges, and USIEF was not thrilled about sending me to very rural areas. These places that I needed to go to in rural Bankura were in very rural parts of the district. There was violence, so safety concerns. I would definitely require a translator and an interpreter. So it wasn't just the fact that I didn't speak Bengali, it was the fact that I didn't speak the local dialects of many of these people. So it's like going down to Louisiana and you don't understand Creole, you know, and they don't speak English, you know, it's just, you have to have an interpreter. There was not much interest, to be honest, to help me with this. It's hot as all get out. I mean, it's really hot, and there's no conveniences. All right, and they really just said, you really just need to go to a library and study the history from the British Raj. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't too happy with that. So anyway, while we were waiting for approval to go to some of these areas, we went to some local Kumbhakars in Kolkata itself. They're called Kumartuli and Patuapara. They are murti-making communities. They are very, very successful and lucrative. They are the ones that send the murtis to temples here in this country, to Hindu temples. And they're made out of straw with clay over it so that they don't have to go through all the energy of firing it, and they are designed to dissolve in rivers. So here's a fella amidst his creations working on these things for a festival. And this just lines the streets. I mean, it's just like one stall after the other. And these people are doing really well. You can see this is a family that's living in this environment. They might do this seasonally. And on the floor here is the clay that they use and process. And on the right of that slide, there is a fellow that is making the armatures out of this straw. So they make a lot of these, they're all mass produced. Okay, there's a formula, a religious formula for these at each scale. You can see the scale of this person and the piece that he's making. And then they take the clay and they mix it to a slip-like consistency and start slathering it on. And they support it in the most ingenious of ways. And they do this sometimes like right on the street. I don't know how these people avoid getting hit by the cars. I mean, it's just the traffic is insane. I literally had to dodge traffic to get this picture because that's how congested the traffic was here. So finally, we were able to arrange a trip to Bankura district, which is just northwest of Kolkata, where I wanted to conduct my research in very rural areas. But I was told that I could only do it for 4 days. I'm like, I'm here for 5 months. I need a lot more time than that. So I'm going to just show you some slides from that. This is on the train. Immediately, once you leave the city, you notice that the density of the population drops quite a bit. So this is just shot out the window of the train. Bishnupur is known for its terracotta temples. And we'll talk about those later. They actually don't have anything to do with the Kumbhakars, but they are terracotta, so I was definitely interested in them. And they all, there was a resurgence in around 1700 in religiousness. And so these temples became very popular in this particular region, and they chose terracotta because it was so available. But these were built by architects, not Kumbhakars. This is called Rasmancha Temple. They have very unusual shapes. Like this one, it's called Jor Bangla, which means two cottages. So it's like two cottages put together. And the detail on them is just fantastic. This one's called Samurai, which means 5 gems. So it's got, you can't see them, but it's got 5 points. Absolutely beautiful. So here's some of the details. And there are many, many, many of them that are just overgrown and unkempt. They're just, I mean, you'll just be walking by and think, oh, there's one, and it's got trees growing out of it. They just don't have the wherewithal and the resources to keep them all up. So part of this trip, we went to Panchmura, and we did all-day trips, and it was like 116 degrees. So here's a potter in Panchmura throwing on a typical wheel. And the work, it is the best-known Kumbhakar village, Panchmura, and they do really, really well. I figured this out really quickly. They live in pakkabar houses, which means they live in concrete houses with more modern amenities. They have accessibility to roads, to Bishnupur, and they sell stuff all over the place. And part of the reason they do so well is due to politics, and you won't get much further than that as an explanation. So lots and lots of work, very refined, mass-produced work. Okay, so I went to USIEF and I said, this is great. I got 4 days in Panchmura and Bishnupur, but I really need to get the variety. I don't understand the context for this work. Like, why is it made? And I want to know the locals they make this stuff for. Who is it made for? I need to see the processes and the methods. I needed to visit more isolated areas, and I needed to see variation if there was any. So finally, USIEF, which is the U.S. India Educational Foundation, that works with Fulbright, told me to contact this fellow. He is the Vice Chancellor of Bankura University, Vice Chancellor, and yes, it's Bandyopadhyay. The British shortened this name to Banerjee. So if you know any Banerjees, it was once Bandyopadhyay. I like the original. He was very keen to help me, and he just said, you come and we will provide whatever you need to do your research because this is important. And I said, great, I'm there. And he provided me with this fellow in the striped shirt that's taller than all the others, named Krishnendu Seth. He was our beloved translator and interpreter, absolutely wonderful person. He was the faculty member at the Bankura University's Abhayakti Jamini Roy. Jamini Roy was an artist, famous Bengali artist, art center. So here's just a little bit of the scale. So to get from Kolkata to Bankura, it's about 3 to 4 hours by train. That doesn't include all the other rides you have to take. It's about 140 miles. So these little yellow thumbtacks all show the villages. Now, there's more places, but those are the general localities that we went to, and went to over 24 families, interviewed 24 families over many trips to Bankura. Over the next 3 months, we would travel there to Bankura University, and their leadership supported us without hesitation in visiting dozens of Kumbhakar families, 12 to 15 villages scattered throughout the very rural areas of Bankura district. It was told to me, this is very important, that the classification of artisans is very important to know. Why there are, weavers, why there are milkmen. These are all classifications of artisans. And their role and status is defined in ancient religious texts, mainly the text Brahma Bharata Purana from the 12th century, and it dictates the classifications of artists. And they are these 9 arrows. They call them the 9 arrows. The Karmakars are the blacksmiths. The Kumbhakars are the potters. The Teli are the masters of oil. The Tanti are the weavers. The Moira are the sweet makers. Bairubri are the pan crafters. Napit are the hairdressers. The Malakars make mala or prayer beads. And the Gop make dairy products and milks, deal with milk. Those are all artisans. The status of the Kumbhakars, and this may sound rather strange to us as Americans, but they are judged by the house they live in and how successful they are by the materials that they live in. Pakibara refers to concrete house, and concrete house has stoves. It's made with concrete and has a refrigeration and modern amenities. And then there's Konchabara. The Konchabara has mud houses and thatched roof, and they cook on the ground. The first village we went to that was, really off the beaten track was called Sindra. The name of the potter was Giram. And Sindra was almost unheard of. They were famous for making these things called bonga elephants, this typical kind of shape of these elephants. And this is an example of Giram's kiln just after it's been fired. And here's Giram. Now, none of the potters, on a lot of our trips, the potters weren't throwing. And we were like, what's the deal with that? And the pottery wheels were all decorated. And we're like, what's going on here? They were worshiping the wheel. They worship the wheel. The wheel gives them prosperity. And so every now and then, before they go dig the clay, they bless the wheel for a period of a week or more. And decorate it every day and feed it and all this sort of thing. Religion is everywhere and in everything. This is just a screenshot out of a book. This village of Sindra was famous because one of its patriarchs had made the first bonga elephant and had gotten a national award for it. And he was born in 1926, so all of this was a while ago, but Sindra was known for carrying on this tradition of making these bonga, unusual elephants. This is the Kumbhakar that made the elephants. This is his son holding his national award. They're made out of bronze or brass, and very proud of it. So I said, could I take your portrait? By the way, I always asked if I could take portraits. This is the portrait of Giram's family, okay? And they lived in Pakibara, which is concrete. I'm gonna move on to talking about the function of a lot of these objects. Like, I needed to know what these objects were and what they were for. So there's this thing called thans. Thans are only in rural areas, okay? They are rural sacred sites. They're not Hindu temples. They are pre-Hindu. They are pre-Vedic, all right? And they're more aligned with a lot of the indigenous customs. People bring, they usually are under like a banyan tree. And so you'll have like this kind of altar thing set up, and people will bring little terracotta horses and elephants. They're not Hindu gods. They have nothing to do with Hinduism. And then they bring food and clay pots to feed the Than and the gods at the Than. All right. These are folk deities that have nothing to do with like Ganesh or Shiva, any of that. It's very folk, rural deities. The Thans are not a place of worship, but rather they're a place to make requests. So if I want my son to get an A on his math exam, I go to the local Kumbhakar and I say I need some horses and elephants. And I go to the Than and I leave the horses and elephants. I don't pray, I just leave the horses and elephants to make the Than god happy. And if my son gets an A on the exam, I give a bigger gift to the Than because the god is happy. It's as simple as that, right? It's a gift exchange. The Than objects, again, these are prayer requests. These objects, these little elephants and horses, are often made by women. Women are not allowed to throw on wheels, all right? There's an explanation for that. I'm not going to get into it. I'll explain later. But the women make these small horses and elephants out of terracotta. So here's a woman with these tiny little elephants and horses, and she lives Conchibara. She lives in a thatched house. This is an example of a thon. In the middle of that thon, you probably see this like radiating form that looks like maybe flowers. They're actually cobras. It is the god Manosha, which I will explain. This is another thon under a banyan tree. Open air markets. Where do these people sell stuff, and where does business and culture take place? They take place in hats. Hats are open air markets for local and indigenous people to buy local goods, trade, and perform dances. So you have to go to a hat. So here's an example of a hat. This is a Sonyamuki. This is in the village of Sonyamuki. This is the hat showing the thon horses and some kadi, which are these pots. Right? So these are kadi in Katra, which have a very unique surface called banak that makes them shiny. So everywhere you go, it's different styles and this sort of thing. These kadi, depending on the size, are used to carry things like water or dairy goods and things like that. And often these kadi are left at thons to make the gods happy. This fellow in white, standing to the right of the image, his name is Ashit Bere, and he is a retired award-winning school teacher, and he volunteered very kindly, very generously to help us with explaining a lot of the meaning of these objects. This is an example of the thon, small elephants and horses, and in Sonyamuki, and they all have a fierce kind of angry look to them. Not all of them look like this, but this is very typical of Sonyamuki. You go to Sonyamuki, all the little horses and even the big ones, they all look angry and fierce. It's kind of cute. And this is a family, a Kumbhakar family in Sonyamuki. Now I'm going to show you a video on thons.
कोई घोड़ा कोई করতে গেছি না ওই মিউজিয়ামে যে
না না এখানে এখানে যে আপনি
হ্যাঁ এখানে সেল ঠিক আছে
মোটামুটি কোথায় থেকে মানে আপনি অর্ডার পান?
ওরা কলকাতা থেকে হয়, তারপরে লোকাল আমাদের পূজার মধ্যে লোকাল হয়, বাঁকুড়া, বিষ্ণুপুর, এদিকে কতুলপুর।
আচ্ছা,
কলকাতা একটা সরকারি দোকানে দিই রিফিউজি হ্যান্ডিক্যাপ ওখানে।
যারা করবেন নি তাদের থাকবে।
স্যার আপনার কোথায় বাড়ি? লক্ষ্মী সাগর, সেই সিমলা বাড়ি। আমি দেখিনি আপনাকে কোনোদিনও কলেজ। না যাই কলেজ, কিন্তু দেখিনি কোনোদিন।
আমাকে দেখেছিস?
না আপনাকেও দেখিনি। মানে আমাদের যে ক্লাস নেই ওই সব ম্যাডাম আর ম্যামদের নাম জানি, আর কিছু জানি না।
আসলে তোরা তো ওখানে হয়তো ক্লাস করিস, তারপর আবার রিটার্ন চলে আসিস না, সেই কারণে ফিজিক্যাল এডুকেশন।
আর আশেপাশে কোথায় আছে মানে এমনি যেখানে কাজ হয়?
আশেপাশে হ্যাঁ আছে তো।
কোন দিকে?
এই তো এদিকে গোটাই তো।
এই পাড়াটা পুরো হয়
পুরোটাই? আগে এইদিকে পাওয়া যাবে?
না এদিকে আন
এইদিকে না, এইদিকে এই গলি।
কুম্ভকার বলছিলাম ওই বাড়িটা।
ওটা ওদিক যে ওই মোড়টা যেতে হবে, এদিকে যাচ্ছে তো।
In our college only, in 4 semesters.
She's studying what?
In our college only.
Oh, okay.
She's a student of political science.
Political science, okay.
That's where I'm at.
তো তোরা এদিকে এদিকে আয়, আমি বলছি তোরা এই কাজ
Okay. We went to some even more remote villages. Probably one of the most remote that we'd ever been to. We ever went to was Hamirpur. As it says here, the chief of the village, the chieftain, is what I was told his title was, in the blue lungi there. Wearing a gamcha around his, or sweat towel around his neck. He's 80 years old, and he said that he had never seen a foreigner. And they were the nicest people. I just told him, I'm a Kumbhakar, my husband's a Kumbhakar in the United States, and they said, come on, we'll show you what we make. And I'm just like, it was very endearing. We bought this pot, it's in the show from this fellow. House, going into a house, and this is what the kilns look like. Oh, and note my husband, that's how big that kiln is, how deep it is. This is where it's loaded, and it vents where he is, and where it's loaded with the, the wood and things like that for the fuel. Lots and lots of wheels being blessed. When the wheels are being blessed, they do not get used. And the women often tend to them and feed them and decorate them. This is typical of the tools that were used by the potters that do both thrown and hand-built forms. The women are allowed to hand-build. And I asked if I could buy the tools from them because I wanted them as examples. And it was almost seen as rude, not because I wanted to, take their tools, but because I offered to buy them. They said, we don't do that. We give them. So if you want them, you take them. I'm like, okay. And I was just told I had to do it. These are little thon horses and elephants. I've talked about, showed you what the Minosha snake goddess is. You worship that which is most feared. So horses are big, and they were used to conquer parts of this land, so they were feared too. So horses are worshipped, elephants, and cobra snakes, which are all over the place. This is Kumbhakar, me with Kumbhakar Pintu Pal, who I ended up having a workshop with. I was very fortunate to have a day or two workshop with him. Very talented. And his kiln. This is the village of Burkam, which was a small village that was a little less, it was more disadvantaged. These people did not own their own land, and a lot of them had reverted to farming because they couldn't sustain their livelihood being potters as much anymore. But there were still potters, they just did it on a more seasonal basis, not all year. So here's a Kumbhakar showing his pots. And this young man here is going to throw on the wheel. I'm going to show you what that looks like. To throw on this wheel that pivots, basically, it's a piece of wood. It's a peg in the ground, and it's centered on this little peg with a little hole, okay? And this is how he's going to throw a pot. This guy's probably like 80 years old, and he's ripped.
আপনাদের যে কাজগুলো আছে না একটু বার করে রাখুন কাজগুলো, মাটির ঘোড়া ফোড়া যেগুলো আছে একটু বার করে রাখুন, খুবই ভালো। হ্যাঁ, বুঝতে পেরেছি। বাজার থেকে এলাম তো আমরা। খাতড়া বাজার ঘুরে চলে এসেছি।
সব তো
হাতিগড়া নাই তো?
ওখানে হাতিগড়া পাওয়া যাবে না, হাড়ি খোলা এইসবই পাওয়া যাবে।
হাতিগড়াটা পাবো।
খাতড়া বাজারে আমাদের বেরিখামারি মাল লাগছে।
দেখলাম। You have seen in the Khatra market? All from here.
Okay.
আঙ্গুল থেকে তো জোর চাইলা।
সবে জোর আঙ্গুল দিলে হবে তো হবে না,
মাটি ঠাসাটা আসল জোর।
সব জোর বুঝলেন।
তা ওইখানে আঙ্গুলের জোর না তাহলে ফিনিশিং ভালো হবে।
আসল হচ্ছে মাটিটা তৈরি করে।
এটা তো বটেই।
মাটিটাকে তৈরি করতে হবে, তাতে
প্রসেসিং
কিছু
করা
পেপার থাকে সেগুলো এখন ফেলতে হবে।
মানে একটা ছোট পাথরও রাখা চলবে।
পিটার সময় আবার বড় করার সময় ফেলতে হবে।
রেকর্ডিং করছে।
দিদি ভাইকে একটু পেট করো না, দিদি ভাইকে পেট করো।
ও ঠিক নিয়ে নেবে, আমাদের থেকে বেশি জানে। আমরা কিছুই জানি না, এরা যে জানে না আমাদের চিন্তা করার কিছু নেই। ও ঠিক নিজের কাজটা ঠিক জানে।
দিদি ভাই ছবিটা দারুণ হচ্ছে।
হাঁটু লাগে।
হ্যাঁ বেরাম করলি।
ওরা কলসি বানিয়ে দেখিয়ে দেন।
একটা একটু ঘুরো, একটু পাত্তা দিয়ে
হাঁটু লাগে।
দিদি ভাই হাঁটুই লাগে যাবে।
কুম্ভকার ওতে কাজ করে, জানে।
না লাগবে না।
হাঁটু পায়ে গেলে শুনিয়ে দিবে।
না 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 পাবো না, অনেক দূরে। তারপরে এখন বয়স হয়ে গেছে না।
ওরা ওখানে এতে কাজ করে, এই বদলটা করে। মেশিন না না হাতে চাকাটা, চাকা মেশিন।
ছোট্ট চাকা,
ওই চাকা দেখে সবাইকে দেওয়ার কথা।
হ্যাঁ চাকা অলরেডি চলে আসছে এখানে।
অনেক দিন আগে নষ্ট
You want
হচ্ছে।
to do here
নষ্ট।
something with some clay?
দিদি ভাইটা যা উঠছে এটা
What do you mean like here?
বিদেশি খুব কম কাজ হয়েছে এই কুম্ভকারদের নিয়ে পার্টিকুলারলি।
We know who this fellow is.
হাঁটু ফাটু হলে তো মাটি জুই হচ্ছে না।
খানা হয়নি মাটিতে।
প্রসেসিং হয় না।
না
হাত সচ্ছে
হচ্ছে না ভালো। গরম করতে পুরো আরাম না। মাটি জুত করতে হবে, পা দিয়ে আরো শান্তি হবে, শান্তি তাকে হাতে ইয়া করতে হবে।
This is already not processed, fully processed clay. That's why they are facing some problem.
It's not plastic. It's not even. And that wheel moves around a lot too. That's some.
Yeah. I look at that and I'm like, wow. You know, it's just incredible. I mean, he has no leverage whatsoever, and he's just throwing with his arms outstretched like that. He's been doing it for decades. I mean, just amazing. Okay. This is going to be about Katra. Katra was known for its banach. The banach refers to what we call in ceramics terra sigillata. In Latin means earth, terra, sigillata, seal, that we put onto the pots and the Greeks did it many millennia ago and realized that it would render something that was otherwise porous somewhat watertight, because they didn't have the technology to get the kiln high enough to be vitreous or watertight. So these pieces were very typical, banach, very shiny clay surfaces. So this is an example of a fired and an unfired pot with banach. I'm going to show you a video with this fellow in a minute. Okay. Now this fellow, I normally never break my promise to not, I always ask permission, especially in these areas, because I am scary to a lot of these people. I'm bigger than most of the men, and my eyes are blue, and I look like a ghost. And these people are very superstitious, and they don't know who the heck I am. So what you're about to see is, I was walking along just filming, and I happened upon this fella and working on his pot, and I scared him, but I kept filming because I was so fascinated with it, and my translator, Krishnendu, was right next to me, or right behind me, and as soon as he showed up, this guy's fight, you will notice his face will just light up because he realizes that I'm not a ghost.
তাকানোর দরকার নেই, আপনি ওইদিকে তাকিয়ে করুন, ওইদিকে তাকিয়ে
আমি ওইদিকে
না না
তাকাচ্ছি, আমরা এইদিকে
ওইদিকে
তাকিয়ে
তাকিয়ে
থাকছি। তার জন্য আমার একটু গোলমাল হচ্ছে।
হ্যাঁ, আপনি ওইদিকে তাকিয়ে করুন, আমাদের ভুল হয়ে যাবে, ওইদিকে তাকানোর দরকার নেই।
Get his name.
How long do they cook it for?
Don't touch them. That's not tea. That's the banach.
You got the video there now.
দুদিন ইয়ে লাগবে না পুরো ওইটা
Yeah, that really is. That's like that's you see all these things?
Totally different. Women are doing this.
এটা আমরা ভিজাই রাখি ভিজাই তাহলে নরম হয় তাইলে জুত হয় আর এটা তো ভিজানো নয় আমরা ভাত করে দুবার করে দিই
আচ্ছা two times they did it two times এটা ভাটা দিলে
যেটা কাঠ দিয়ে পোড়া
তাহলে প্লেন কালারটা আসবে
চকচকে
আরেকবার দিব আরেকবার দিব যত যত দুবার দিবে রংটা কালারটা তত আসবে
if you did it many times the color will come automatically
Yeah.
2 to 3 times
2 to 3 times. That makes sense. Build up layers.
That's exactly what we do with Sijalata.
okay
So we don't boil it. The boiling.
It's a lot. I knew, I was like, there's no way I can just get all this stuff. I could have, hours of video on just one little topic. I mean, it's just crazy how much footage we shot. Okay. So this last part of this is just, I just wanted to show you some of the portraits of these people in their setting. This fella here, this was a shot in Bishnupur in a house. They invited us all into their homes. They didn't know who the heck we were. And were just very generous with their time. And many of them offered us tea and things like that. Very proud people, very proud. I tried to get the women too. The women play a very vital role. This image shows this was in a disadvantaged village where this potter could no longer sustain himself making clay pots for date palm oil. So he had reverted to buying plastic pots, and note they're in the exact same shape as the terracotta pots. And this will be the last video. It is on a collage of the art forms that are in West Bengal that wasn't the center of my research, but I found equally fascinating. It is the epicenter of many traditional folk arts in India. He's making a silk sari. This woman makes mats out of reeds. She's just splitting the reed. The Patachitra painting that's in the gallery is about COVID, the COVID pandemic. Thank you. I will now my husband will join me here at the table, and you all can ask us questions. I'll give us about 10 minutes or so, and if after that you want to mosey on over to the gallery and help yourself to the food over there, please do. Thank you so much for coming. Yes.
All those little elephants and horses that are left under the banyan trees, over the centuries, they must accumulate. What happens to them? Are they cleared out after a while?
I don't know if anybody's taking them, but there are individuals that are assigned to clean up the fawn, but I don't know really what happens to them. When you go, you will see old rooms, and basically the whole idea is it goes right back into the earth and breaks down.
And there are mounds after time of deep sea, right? These keeps on building up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are women not allowed to throw a woman?
I knew you were going to be the one to It's kind of humorous, actually. Throwing on the wheel is seen as, well, one, in order to throw on a wheel, thank you. In order to throw on a wheel, you have to spread your legs. Okay, and then when you throw the form, it looks very phallic. So it becomes sort of a manifestation in many parts of India as a form of Shiva or fertility, a phallic symbol. And women don't do that.
It should be noted, though, also with that is that even though women aren't allowed to use that equipment, they actually own it. So they can't. The men can't sell it. They can't do anything with it without the permission of their wives. Yeah.
Women are the only ones allowed to bless the throwing wheel, is that correct? Or no?
No. In fact, I have some footage of many people will invite a Brahmin priest to come and do a ceremony on blessing. And it's quite elaborate. There's all these materials, betel leaves and lime and food and things like that, that he goes through this whole thing in chanting. So the priest does it, the women do it. The most elaborate ones are done by Brahmin priests. Yes, Bridget.
I had a question about the wheels they throw on. Does everybody make their own, or do they buy it from a wheel maker?
Most of the Kumbhakars make them, but there's a longer story to that. There is a government incentive that's, I didn't want to say it on, I don't want to be recorded as this, but because it's very political, but there is a government program that provides the wheels to the potters if they attend a class. Yeah, I'm going to leave that at that because it's rather controversial, and a lot of potters are afraid to do it because there's funding involved, and they have these leaders in the villages that are really powerful, called the Gram Panchayat, and Gram Panchayats are very powerful, and it's almost kind of equivalent to kind of like a mob sort of thing, and you're either in the good with the Gram Panchayat or you're not. And, nobody's going to tell you. Bengalis and Indians in general are very they don't let on. You have to know people for a while before they'll explain stuff to you, and they're very self-effacing. They don't want to tell you negative things. Yes, Mark.
Did you do any research about the clay bodies they were using? Did each potter harvest their own?
Yeah. So part of the reason why some of the potters, like in Burkam, were no longer able to work full time is because the clay. There's different grades of clay, and the sources are getting depleted. So what happens is the potters will buy a plot or land, or they'll use a plot of land from a farmer, and they'll dig all the soil off, and then the clay is underneath, just like here. And once they've depleted it, they have to either go get more, and they're having to go further and further away. So the quality of the clay might not be the same or as good. So that puts a lot of the villagers out of business. Up until recently, there weren't even any roads to a lot of these places that we went to. So getting heavy clay, back to a village can be quite a challenge. But yeah, to answer your question, there are different types of clay, and one potter, when I was doing a workshop, brought in his own clay, and it was really super fine. It was a different color. So depending on where they source it, but there's clay all over the place. It's just a matter of how fine it is. Yeah.
Do they make lids on the wheel?
Yes.
Oh, no, I was going to say they use immense amounts of clay. Like some of the people we talked to, we're like, we had to ask again, are we translating this correctly? Someone will say, we use about 6 or 7 tons a year for one potter. So, it was like, well, wait, is it metric tons? So like, it's weird. Is the translation correct? No, it's like they bring it in on these huge flatbeds, dump it, let it weather, and use it. So they go through a lot. They also said that the indication given to me was sometimes they go and kind of, not steal it, but they go when no one's around or no one will notice to get it. Yeah, because if you don't have clay, you don't have business. Yeah.
Yes, Tanya.
With the blessing of the wheel thing, is that on a calendar?
Yes. It occurs right before they dig the clay. They dig the clay once a year. They call clay soil, and they dig it once a year. And so there's a waiting period before that where they don't throw, and they spend a lot of time giving good alms to the wheel god and the gods to, make a productive year by blessing the wheel, which is in the shape usually of a phallic shape.
They have a different calendar. There's a different calendar, right? Like, so technically they don't work for about a month or so, the beginning of the year, which in the first month of the Bengali calendar, which starts sometime around the middle of April, end of April into May. So, and that's, yeah.
Yes.
So how are you incorporating this into your own work and still honoring the culture?
Very good question. So what are my plans? Well, yeah. So I mean, even though I teach ceramics, I'm very comfortable doing it. I'm not so much making stuff. I'm not trying to emulate the work of the Bengali potters. What I am doing is, this was actually more of like a sociology kind of assignment, which it was very academic, getting all the sources cited and translated. It was very much like sociology field work, as it were. So very different than going as an artist. Now, what am I going to do with it? Well, one of the things that I promised one of my recommenders who wrote me a letter was that I would write a book. So I'm working on a book about it because there's nothing written in English about this, and there's very little stuff outside of West Bengal, much less India, about this. There's nothing. And so that's one of my goals. And then my second goal is one that I've started already from here, is to try to get an exchange program with Bankura University between us and them, starting with faculty and then seeing if we can get some students over there for a semester or more. Not necessarily taking classes, because that gets into kind of weird territory, but working on certain projects and seminar type things as a cultural exchange. Yes.
So in your book, you're going to focus on, social roles of women and men, but also children as well, and what they're allowed to do and not do in pottery?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I asked a lot of the Kumbhakar parents is, do your children want to, carry on what you do? And the answer varies wildly. I mean, a lot of the boys do want to carry on what their fathers do, especially if they're in a rural place and their father's doing well. But a lot of the girls that I saw were actually going on to places like med school. A lot of them were quite successful, and, they were going to probably be expected to, hold up part of the family. I mean, this is very common in Asian families, but it really just depended on the social status. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of sounds like you were just sort of starting to develop the relationships that you really need to understand the people and the culture.
Yes.
How do you go to that?
I plan on it. Yes, absolutely. I don't know if I'll go back during May and June. It was so hot. We almost had heat stroke a couple of times. Had to get out WHO packets, if you're familiar with those. If you've been to parts of Africa or whatever, it's what happens when you're about to enter heat stroke and you have to get a hydration pack in you quick. Otherwise, you're going to go down. So I don't know if I'll do that. It's my second time going to India at this time of year, and the best time to go is November to January. But because I was delayed, then everything else moved forward. So it was hot. It was hot by March.
So will you try to reconnect with the people that you met?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And the translator, I'm very good friends with him, and I feel very comfortable with him. He wants to do projects in Latin America that are kind of similar that he's done research on. So who knows where it'll go? I've just got to wait till another sabbatical. Yeah. All right. Yes.
How did the heat affect all the clay and the working and the drying time?
They just, I mean, so they cover a lot of the pieces that they don't want to dry too quickly, like larger pieces, just like we would in the studio. But it's humid. It's very humid, especially right before monsoon starts in May, June, end of May, June. So it really starts to get humid. Up until then, they just work quite wet. I mean, would you say that? I mean, they work. I mean, so Nick did an interesting thing, and he did not want me showing his video. Two of the men asked me. I never would have accepted it if they had asked me. Asked Nick if he would throw on their wheel. So one of them was the fella that was at Burkham, I think Burkham, that threw on the wheel, that old fella that was throwing on that thing that was just like on a peg, on a stick thing. And Nick tried to do it. And so he can speak more about that. And then they asked him to throw on another wheel at another location, so.
Yeah, you said that the wheel is just sits on like literally like a needle point type thing. So not only do you have to push on it, you have to push on it on both sides at the same amount of pressure, or else the wheel itself goes off. So it is really extraordinarily difficult, especially if you have any type of back problems, like which I do. Like you just sitting there and go, oh God, I'm going to pop my lower disc or something doing that. And yeah, so it's like I've never thrown anything or never worked on anything like that before. And it's just amazing they can do that. I think part of the way they get away with it is they do work with the clay really wet. So there's not a lot of resistance, so they don't have to have that leverage that you always do in the wheel where you get your elbows in, they can move it out on the side. But
it's also got a lot of aggregate in it too, to help prevent all the cracking and problems that you might encounter with fast drying.
Yeah, it's a good, because we went there, or Laura got the grant under the idea that in part, that a lot of people were coming in from different academic disciplines to study that part of the world, but there were no artists doing that. And it'd be interesting to look at some of these crafts that are going to quite possibly disappear in the future or be modified substantially as the country modernizes, so to speak. And it'd be just good for someone like us to work in clay to go and visit people who work in clay. We have a different angle, a different understanding of things that like an art historian might not have, certainly a sociologist or, an ethnographer wouldn't have. And where we were lacking was, of course, we didn't have the language skills, but just we didn't really know a lot about the local religion culture, a lot of those types of things. We knew a lot about the technical stuff. We could, the clay bodies, the kilns, the wheel, all that type of stuff. You register with that immediately because you have that expertise. But some of the other stuff, we really had no idea. And so we had to just take notes and then read up on it and then maybe ask people, so we were catching up on a lot of like the sociological aspects of it.
Yeah. Well, yes, one more, yeah.
How do people relate to you being a teacher?
That's interesting you say that because I did tell people that I was a teacher, but a lot of these people aren't educated, so I didn't want to come across as being arrogant. I mean, because I told them first that I was a Kumbhakar so that I could break the ice with them. They're afraid. I mean, it's like they're kind of intimidated when people just come in and start, looking at what they're doing without a context. So when I told them that I was a Kumbhakar and showed them the murtis that I made, I showed the similarities, how I'm similar to you kind of thing, that I found was really effective at breaking the ice. So I really didn't talk much about it. They don't understand necessarily like higher education at all.
Assume they're teaching the children to take over their business in essence.
Mm-hmm.
You're teaching.
Yeah. Right, which is a totally different, kind of role than what you and I understand. I mean, because they're carrying on something that is defined by religion as a role, and then also by gender. And so there's there's different roles that women have and different roles that men have. And so in that respect, it was a little bit strange that I was coming in there as the woman and not him. But I kind of like the tension. But they were very, it was interesting. The people in these rural areas were incredibly kind and sweet people. I mean, whereas you go to Kolkata and people, won't give you the time of day. Everything's fast paced, and they don't understand and they don't care about what's going on in these rural areas. But these people were really, it was like slow paced, and they were just really generous and interested in what we were doing, and appreciated it too. All right, one more, and that's it, and then we'll go to the gallery.
The diversity of the villages that you went to, because they're isolated, that they remained in small pockets. How fast do you think that with the development and the spreading of cities and having roads available, how fast will those niche disappear?
Well, that's a very good question you ask, because one of the things that was affecting a lot of these rural areas was the fact that the government had shut down a lot of the rural train. They wouldn't stop. These people counted on selling. They'll jump on a train and sell their goods and then make their way back home on the returning train. I mean, this has been done for decades. But what they've stopped doing for huge swaths of very rural areas is they've stopping. They just go on to the next big city. So a lot of these areas are getting disenfranchised by the trains not stopping. So what's going to happen? Well, that further isolates them. It prompts them to look for other ways of getting their work out. But one of the things I will say is that during the pandemic, thon objects surged. I mean, the Kumbhakars were thriving because of religiosity. People became very, very religious because, when things are bad, you turn to God and beg for help when all your family members are dying. So what's going to happen with some of these? I think some of them are in definite danger of disappearing, but others, it just remains to be seen on how the demographics change, and whether their children end up leaving and going to cities, and how much education impacts that. One of the things that is interesting is the university, Bankura University, is trying to instill, because for years and years and years, even since the last time I went to India, which was in 1998, before this, the emphasis has been for decades. It's almost like the Industrial Revolution, and it's like all of a sudden, people can get educated and have access to cars and cell phones and things like that, and they can go get jobs. So what do they pick jobs in? They pick jobs in things that are lucrative, like engineering and things like that. And in the process, they leave their villages that would once have done all these things. Now, you've got a up-and-coming middle class. And the up-and-coming middle class is looking back and saying, gee, if we don't do something about culture, that our roots, we're going to lose it. And so there's this return to culture and interest in culture, which I think is really important. And Bankura University is very, very centered on that, and making business with that too. So hopefully that'll, through an educated channels, it will help that survive. Thank you all so much for coming, and I hope to see you at the gallery. Thank you.